Caller, thanks for calling the education game. How can I help you today?
Yeah, thanks for having me. So just to recap some of the things I've talked to you about. I have a daughter who's 3.5, turning 4 later this year.
Yeah.
And I so last year when everything got disrupted with COVID, we had a lot of time with her at home to work on a few skills. And those skills include basic skills like managing herself, um, learning how to put away stuff, to control her temper, to not scream, uh, and go to the potty and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
and also more advanced academic skills like basic arithmetic, counting, learning her alphabets, her numbers, learning a bit of phonics,
Yeah.
things like
Excellent.
that.
Mm-hmm.
So what I noticed, so she's been back in school for about 4 months now, and I've noticed a deterioration in those skills.
Which
Um,
ones?
so an example would be, I think I see a deterioration more in her academic skills. So an
Okay.
example would be, we used to play a game called Shopkeeper, and that involves me being the shopkeeper and she's the buyer. So I give
Mm.
her actual coins and I say, okay, you come to the shop and if you want to buy a banana, it costs you 10 cents. If you want to buy an orange, it costs you 25 cents.
That's
And
terrific.
then she would count out the coins and I would give her actual coins like dimes and pennies and quarters. And I
Yeah.
would teach her how to count out and then she would count it out and give it to me. And she came to the point where she was sort of comfortable giving me a 25, a quarter coin and saying, this is 25 cents. I
Oh,
know this is 25 cents.
that is
But
fantastic.
but she has sort of lost it now. So now she's back to counting one, two, three, four, five, and you
Oh,
know,
wow.
it's part of it is my fault because I've not kept up with the games. But I think it points more to the fact that in school she's really not getting a lot of rigorous academic activity.
Hmm.
Um, so in some sense, she's growing in her social ability, so, her ability to interact with the teacher, to listen to a teacher, to listen to instructions, which is great. I mean, that's the kind of skills that she does need to
Yeah, sure.
have. But in terms of her maybe more academic skills, she's losing out a little bit. And I also noticed that she's losing out in her ability to sort of sit still and engage herself with a few books. So
Hmm.
she used to be able to do that for, let's say, 45 minutes 4 months ago. And this morning it was down to 25 minutes. So I'm noticing that. And again, I think part of it is definitely our fault that we have not been keeping up with that at home.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, let me
but
just pause you.
yeah,
Because you said this once before. I just want to make sure that this is a no blame, no shame kind of conversation. There is never fault to be placed, but there's just a problem that needs to be dealt with. So I'm going to just coach you away from putting fault at anyone's feet. It's just a situation you'll have to deal with. So anyway, continue on.
yeah, no, I appreciate that. I would say that I take maybe a better way of putting it is I take responsibility for something like that happening
Bingo.
because
Okay,
I think I'm responsible for what happens to her as a
that's
parent,
right.
and so I think
Great to hear you say that.
that's yeah that's my perspective. And so all this is to say is we have been looking at different schools to sort of think about what sort of programs and where would be a good place to place her so that she gets a little bit more rigor in her academic let's say or rigor and exposure in terms of her learning more academic type skills.
Ooh, okay. There's a bunch here, and first off, let me just encourage you because to hear a dad who is taking this type of attention in their child's development is just it. Man, it's just so great to hear because I don't get calls from dads very often. So I want to just encourage you and thank you, frankly, for taking that such a leadership role. That will be huge. All right. So let me start there. But I also want to challenge or maybe reframe something that you've said a couple times, which is you talked about the basic skills of managing herself, self-control, putting her things away, sitting still, those types of things. I consider those to be extraordinarily high value, high rigor skills, because and I just wrote some blog posts about this. I may send you one afterwards. I talked about the importance of self-control and teaching it in a child, and it sounds like you've been doing that. If your daughter's able to sit or was able to sit for 45 minutes reading a book, that means you have been teaching her how to manage herself, and that skill is a high level skill, right? That skill is actually foundational to all other things that she's going to learn, because when she can control her mind, right, now she can focus on learning any other task in a quarter of the time. So I just want to reframe the language around high level skills versus basic skills. But again,
I apologize.
No. But I hear your point. I mean, I get it. I want the other callers who might listen to this to kind of recognize that self-control breeds so many other positive, quote unquote, higher level skills. Okay, that's the second part. The third is I love the shopkeeper game. Oh my gosh. I hope other caller or hope other listeners are hearing that and going, that is something that I'm going to begin with my child right now. So great job on that. That is a terrific way. But also now getting into your question, really, how quickly some of this stuff gets lost. It's no different than any other activity, right? When you're practicing it with some regularity, you maintain it and you grow it. When you begin to move away from the practice, it does slip. And now here's the other problem. And your call is really getting at this, which is in your child's current school, they are assuming that this child can't count. They're probably assuming that this child can't sit still very well. Probably assuming a lot of things about the child that aren't actually the case. Therefore, when they're talking about numbers, they're talking about, here's what a 1 looks like. She probably learned that a year ago, right? Yeah. Here's how to count to 10. She probably learned that a year ago or 9 months ago. And so she's now not being exposed to the type of training that you were giving her. And that's the right language. It's training. You were training her up as you're supposed to. So that creates this very real and ongoing problem that you're going to have, that I had with my kids, that parents who are really taking the lead in their child's life are all going to run into at some point. And that is that your child is going to begin to outstrip the educational expectations of whatever school they're in. And that's really that's the nut of what you're really calling about, is it not?
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah. It's not common. I mean, it's not uncommon, dude. Let me just tell you, it's I get a lot of calls from parents who are saying, gosh, I'm so discouraged because I know my child is able to do more, but this is all they're being asked to do at school. And so here, getting to your challenge that lay in front of you. Again, I went through with each of my kids, talk to parents all the time that have to deal with a similar challenge. The first question I will put to you is really a run around, before I answer your question, is really one around the context of your household. Do you have a grandparent? Do you have a stay-at-home parent? Is it you? Is it your wife? Is there an aunt or cousin or somebody who can play a more active, ongoing role in the life of the child during the day? Or is it going to be a full-time school environment for your child?
Unfortunately for us, it looks like it's going to be a full-time school environment because we don't have anyone around.
Yeah. Very normal, and it is what it is, and there's no perfect environment, right? And I stayed home with my kids for a few years, and that's when all my hair fell out, right? So there's, I can't say that I would encourage that, but I wish I had my hair back. Let me just say that. All right, so then you're going to be looking at a full-time schooling environment, and now she's really still in fourth or pre-K 4. So she's got a year.
She's in pre-K 3. She's going into pre-K 4.
Got it. Okay. Got it. Next fall, she'll be going into pre-K 4. Okay. So then here's what I generally recommend, because some parents will say, I want to change the school. I want to make the school fit my child. And honestly, I've not seen a situation where that parent's efforts have borne the fruit that she or he were looking for. The school is a system, and one parent pushing on the system is not going to move it, generally. The best you can hope for are the following, I think. And this is what I recommend. This is what we did. This is what I talked to other parents about. This is what other parents taught me to do, which is, first off, you start to negotiate with a negotiation with your child's teacher. And that looks something like this. My daughter can do these things. Can we figure out a way to begin to feather in additional work that's more on her level? Right? That's really the question. And so sometimes it's harder for teachers, honestly. That means a teacher now has to have multiple lessons going at the same time, multiple evaluations, multiple curriculums. It's more challenging, but that's where you begin. And then regardless of what that teacher says, and you put the nail on the head a moment ago when you said that you are responsible, you as the parent are responsible for your child's learning outcomes. It is not the school's responsibility. Therefore, what I would recommend is that you think about what I call a shadow school. And that's the idea that, yes, they're going to go to school. Yes, we're going to negotiate with the teacher. We're going to try to get more activities at the level of the child. But we are also going to make sure that a couple times a week, definitely on the weekends, we are running a shadow school. I might even change the language on that too, because I don't like the language of school. Because the language of school is, here's your worksheet, sit in a row, all of it's adult driven, right? I would change it to your child's learning will be something that you're going to drive outside of school. Not school, learning. And the distinction is you're going to ask her questions about what does she like to do? What is she really interested in? And a parent like you're going to really love this. Because once that child says, I love, or I'm really, let me ask you then, what are some things that she really likes, she's curious about, or things that you've seen or noticed about her that she really enjoys?
Yeah, she likes music. She likes, she has an active imagination.
Uh-huh.
So one thing which we do a lot of her learning is not really, I suppose, learning in a traditional sense. It really is games which are catered to her imagination.
Yes.
The kind of things that she likes to think about. And so I can definitely see, that aspect of creativity in her.
Yes.
Ability to just, even from a young age, just make up stories and think of, things that could happen, without any prompt. So
Right.
I would say music and, I guess, more creative arts. Right? So.
Got it. Well, and then there's also, the shopkeeper, it's a game, right? And you took a game and made it into a high level learning experience, and that's terrific. So, and let's remember, her spending time with you is something that every child wants, although they may not be able to articulate it. So I know that it sounds like she's interested in music, imagination, and games, but she's also interested in spending time with her parents. So to the degree you can weave those together, particularly around the things that she's interested in. So you can teach reading with music, right? You can learn about composers, you can read about composers, and then you can find a song by a composer, listen to it, play a simple version of it if you have a ukulele or a guitar, or borrow somebody's, right? So there's ways to merge all this together. What we're describing is something called learner-centered or child-centered learning, which is start with where the child is interested, and then you build from there. You develop a learning plan based on the child's interest, not based on a bureaucrat 1,000 miles away saying that here's the Common Core, here's what your child should learn when they're 6 years old. You know your child better than anyone else in the world. Sounds like you have the energy and the curiosity and the intentionality to build a learning plan, and I can certainly help with some of that, but it also sounds like you're kind of well on your way. But back to this big question about what do we do with school, if you are committed and really have no other choice than the traditional, 5-day week school, the negotiations is the first part, setting up a shadow school or shadow learning environment, which really it becomes a culture of the household that what we do for fun is we read. What we do for fun is we play, what did you call it? The shopkeeper game, right? What we do for fun, we play music together and we sing songs. That's a culturally different approach to learning than what normally happens in the minds of most Americans, at least, which is I send them to school to learn, and then they come home and it's playtime, right? What you're doing is you're sending them to learn some things. They're coming home to learn things in a different way, a way that's relational, a way that's active, in a way that's fundamentally not likely in their school. And that's the unfortunate reality of most schools. Now, here's the last part I would say to you, and that is, and I've talked to some parents who've been doing this for some period of time now, right? They can, because of the parent, they can go to the school and say, you know what, I'd like to bring my daughter out of class today or tomorrow at 1 o'clock. You don't have to give a reason. You're the parent, right? And so if there are days of the week that you're like, okay, you know what, we haven't had the opportunity to play the shopkeeper game, or we haven't had the opportunity to have one-on-one time, or if my child doesn't seem to be getting much time outside, you can say, hey, you know what, school on next Tuesday, my daughter, I'm going to have to pull her out of class at 1 o'clock, right after lunch. You don't have to give a reason. If they ask, you can say it's personal, right? Because it is. It's your daughter, right? And you pull her out, and that afternoon is a day of learning and fun. And again, talking to a lot of parents who are reasserting their parental authority to make decisions that they know are in the best interest of their child, and they're overruling the school. Now, as long as you pull the child out after around 10 or 10:30, at least in a public school environment, the school's still going to get paid for that child's day, right? So they don't lose anything around that, but you gain, because now if you have the time in your schedule, now you both can be more intentional about a learning experience outside of the school environment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I will say something though.
Sure.
So, and I want to pick up on those 2 points of shadow school and culture.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you sort of put your finger on it, that what my intention is really to build a culture of learning,
Yes.
of self-learning.
Yes.
And that this is what we do in our house. We read, we are polite to each other, we help out each other. That's kind of things that I want to build as part of our household culture.
Yep.
What I'm really getting at is I have already been doing something like a shadow school with my daughter.
Mm-hmm.
But what I found is that there are periods where I simply don't have the time, or things just get in the way.
Yes.
And so really what I'm looking at is saying, okay, she's going to spend 6 hours, 7 hours a day in school. What system or what way of teaching, or which school would sort of maximize that 7 hours?
Yeah.
Given the limitations, I understand that it would not meet my expectations as a parent. I understand that, but at least to the best of the system's limitations. So I'll give you an example. We've been reading into the Montessori system,
Mm-hmm.
and we think that there are a lot of good things about the Montessori system, which
Yes.
I think sound attractive to us.
Yes.
So that would be something I would say, okay, would I rather put her in a conventional school or Montessori school? At least where we stand right now, I think a Montessori school sounds better in terms of where we want to build some of those skills. And as you said, I use the word basic, but really I was trying to be basic in the sense that if you don't have them, it's like a foundation in the house.
Agreed.
You
I
can't
hear
build
you.
a house.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so I completely agree with that. So I was really getting at what
Model.
system of schools, or which
Mm-hmm.
schools, or what model, right, would sort of be best used or best served for the time that we have her in school.
Got it. So everything you're describing about your philosophy and your approach does align very well with Montessori. Generally, what I tend to tell folks is the more traditional the learning, the more likely your child's going to become, in many cases, not all, but in many cases, less curious, less creative, less of a builder, and more of a conformist, right? They'll just conform to whatever the authority says. And of course, there's a need for that and a role for that, but not all the time, particularly in these ages. So Montessori, definitely. There's a couple others, though, that I'll throw out there, and they're really new ones that are coming online, and they really require some management in terms of setup. One is MicroSchools. Have you heard of that concept?
Oh no, not yet.
Okay, so it's a fluid concept, but generally speaking, it is this: 4, 5, 6 families, different age kids. They agree that they're going to work together. It's a bit of like a collaborative or a co-op, but they use certain online technologies like maybe a math curriculum, maybe a reading curriculum that's leveled to their child. But then the rest of the time, it's really around building experiential activities, developing a culture, developing a love of learning, right? So it's blending the kind of the hard rules or the hard learning like reading, math, with the creative learning of, oh, I know I can learn how to do things on my own, the independence of learning, right? But it requires families to gather together. And so I don't know if you're a part of a church. If you are, there's a possibility that other families are having these same questions. And so convening a gathering with them to say, hey, listen, here's what we're thinking about. Again, I can help you think through or talk with other parents about what a microschool might actually look like in practice. And then that's also something you can experiment with maybe this upcoming summer, maybe over spring break, and kind of test some things out, maybe a couple weekends over the next several months to test it to see if this might work. So that's one. That's where you kind of build it yourself. There's a second model, which is a hybrid school model. And a hybrid school is where you go to that school 2 days a week, maybe it's 3 days a week. Usually these are private, unfortunately. The way that public schools get paid is the child has to be in the seat. The child doesn't have to be learning, but they just have to be in the seat, and the school will get paid. A whole conversation we could have about that. But hybrid schools are, if they're there 2 days a week, now you have much more flexibility. But again, you'll need to have some adult present to support that child during those times, and it doesn't sound like you might have that opportunity. A micro school, though, because it's you all making it up yourselves, you could create a micro school where you're responsible for the kids on Saturday, right? Another parent is responsible on Monday, Tuesday. Another one's Wednesday, Thursday. Another is Friday, right? And so you can work out based on your all's collective schedule what might actually work. But yes, it takes time and it takes some intentionality. And a lot of parents aren't ready for that level of creative problem solving in the learning space. They think that the old model of education is good enough. In fact, the old model of education is a dinosaur, and COVID was the extinction level event that has now crushed everything that we've come to appreciate, or at least come to assume about what a traditional learning experience was for. So again, if you want to talk, or if you have a couple friends who have kids around the same age, it doesn't. 2 to 3 years on either side is sufficient. You can form a micro school, and my recommendation is, if you're thinking about it, have the conversation and then run some tests, get more comfortable with the idea, and if you guys get to a place of comfort, go ahead and make the switch, test it out, and see how it goes. You will not, I promise you, if you go that route, it'll be hard, but you absolutely will never regret it. It will be hard, but it will absolutely be worth it.
Great. Yeah. There are definitely a few families in our area, in our neighborhood rather, who have kids around the same age. So I think it's definitely a conversation we can have with them.
Yeah. Well, bring me into that. Call me. I'd be happy to talk with folks and just kind of frame it out, and then let you guys run, and then we can touch base if you have other questions. But again, Montessori, hybrid, micro school. Again, the hybrid is going to require more adult of time of you, MicroSchool, you could figure it out maybe. But regardless of what happens, the key point that I want every person that's maybe listening to this, all three people that might be listening to this show, to know is when you said that you are responsible, that is the key point. Because once you actually internalize that, now you're going to call me and ask for advice, right? And advice may be exactly what you paid for it, worth zero, but you're still looking, right? You're still trying to figure it out. You're going to talk to other friends. You're going to be kicking these things around because you know it is your responsibility, and you are 100% right. I wish more parents realized that, because if they did, we could actually change schools from the bottom up. Imagine if you and 20 other families all were having the same conversation, and you went to your school, your Montessori school or whatever, and said, listen, this is what we're looking for. And we're prepared to lean in here if you give us what we're looking for. I can tell you there are principals around the country that would jump at the chance of getting 20 families that are all aligned around driving learning. That's what teachers are looking for. That's what principals are looking for. So anyway, I could go on and on about it, but I want to just praise you for your intentionality. This is serious business. And I have no doubt that whatever happens, wherever your child ends up, you're going to make sure that she is going to do just fine. I have no doubt in my mind.
Well, full disclosure, I'm an Asian parent. And in Asian cultures, you're either a doctor, engineer, lawyer, or sailor. Just joking. But, no, I really appreciate your input. I think it's worth far more than I paid you, which is nothing.
Let's hope so.
But I like the MicroSchool idea. I think it's definitely something I sort of loosely thought about in terms of forming a group, sort of a tutoring group with the parents in our neighborhood. But I never really pursued that. So I think if there's an existing model I can look into, that would be really great.
Yep. I tell you what, stay on the line after the call, and I will send you some information, and we can talk a little bit more about it. But listen, thank you for the call, and again, stay on the line. In a moment, we'll talk a bit more. This is Matt with the Education Game, guys. Thanks for joining us. I hope this call was helpful to your conversation with your family, with your friends, with your child around education. Please join us in the future. This is Matt Barnes with the Education Game. Thanks.